Welcome back to Light the Fuse. Charles, how you feeling? How you doing? Give me everything. What's your state of mind?
Everything's great. It's a brand new year, and I'm excited for all that lies ahead. How about you? How are you doing, Drew?
Yeah, I'm feeling optimistic. Well, I mean, any year that has a new Mission Impossible movie is going to be better than a year that doesn't have a new Mission Impossible movie.
Yeah.
So right there, we're on the right path, I think.
And we get a John Wick movie. Has that happened before? Have we had both in 1 year before?
No, this is the first time, I think.
This is the first time. Okay, so yeah, wow, that's 2023 is going to be pretty awesome for that.
Yes.
And this episode we've got is amazing because we've got James Mather on the show. It's funny, we had someone reach out to us and say, "Can you get more sound guys on the show?" And it was like we had lined up James Mather a couple of years ago, I think it was right after Fallout, and then he got pulled into some other job and he couldn't do it. And so he was like, "Oh, he was like, oh, can we talk again, when the next mission comes out, and we'll do it then." But then we saw that he had done Top Gun Maverick, and this person on Twitter just bugged us to be like, "Hey, can you talk to more sound guys?" So this is why it's always good to reach out and tell us what you want to hear and who you want us to talk to. Never be afraid to say these things, because then I was like, you know what? I'm going to check in with James Mather because he did Top Gun Maverick, and maybe he'll come on and talk to us before the next mission, and then we'll get him back on again when the next mission comes out, because why not? Because we've got Rogue Nation, Fallout, and Top Gun Maverick to talk about. This week it's only Rogue Nation and Fallout. Next week in part 2 we'll get into Top Gun Maverick, so you'll get a little bit of Light the Fuselage in part 2. But this week I also wanted to say, when he mentions Libra, that's the code name for Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. So when he's talking about Libra, that's talking about the new Mission Impossible movie. And that code word, as we've talked about in the show before, continues the trend. Ghost Protocol was Ares. So I think wasn't the title of Ghost Protocol Project Ares at one point? I think that was at least the code name.
Like the placeholder name, yeah.
Yeah, and then Rogue Nation was Taurus, Fallout Gemini, and then Dead Reckoning Part 1 is called Libra, and then Dead Reckoning Part 2's code word is Scorpio.
Scorpio! Do you remember that Simpsons episode with Hank Scorpio, voiced by Albert Brooks? Yeah, okay. That's his theme song.
And he also references wizards a couple of times in the interview, and that's because he did the sound for like 4 Harry Potter movies, a whole bunch of them, I think.
Yes, yeah. He is awesome. I actually cannot wait for people to hear this interview because I think it was great. He was great. And so, yeah. And now the person who reached out to us on Twitter will be very happy because we've got a new sound person.
Yeah.
On the show. Anything else, Charles?
That's all I've got. So if you've got, do you have anything that you have wanted to say before this interview started, Drew, by chance?
Did I? I don't know. Tell me. What do I have to say?
Your favorite part of the show.
Oh, well, that obviously is my favorite part of the show. I thought there was something else that I was forgetting. No, of course I have my shout-outs to give, obviously. This episode is brought to you by Jeremy Dillon and his podcast, My Favorite Album. And I don't know if he still wants us to plug his Better Call Saul episodes, but I'm going to do it anyway. Listen to his Better Call Saul episodes.
Well, also, and we did a big crossover with him.
We did a crossover that you can listen to on his podcast, or you can join the Patreon and listen to it there.
Yes, because we have it on our Patreon. It is our big breakdown of our top 10 best movies of 2022. We each did a list, and that's a fun chat that we had with Jeremy, the two of us and him.
Yeah, it's become a yearly tradition. I love it. So, and then John B., Elvis Ripley, and Suchet. Those are our amazing sponsors, and obviously they demand the highest quality shout out, so I hope I oblige them.
I think you delivered.
Thank you, Charles. I appreciate that. We will be back at the end of this episode to wrap it up. Love giving sound direction to James Mather, a world-renowned. What is your title? Sound editor?
Supervising sound designer, I think, is the way it's going at the moment.
Supervising sound designer. Wow, making me feel even worse.
Do you like our really complicated way of syncing this, where we all just clap right before we start recording?
Yeah.
Or right after we start recording, I should say.
I love it.
But none of you at home get to hear the clap.
So this is going to be both the Light the Fuselage and Light the Fuse episode, because James, you've been on a journey with Mr. McQuarrie.
Yeah, a blessed journey. It's interesting. When we were going to talk originally a few years ago, I had only really done one movie with Chris and Eddie Hamilton and a chap called Tom Cruise, and it was a learning experience, a big learning curve, because obviously there's no wands, there's no spells, there's lots of cars, there's lots of running. Lots of running,
Helicopters, yeah.
helicopters, and so it was. We'd done a film. We'd done a film with Paramount prior to that, the Jack Ryan movie with Ken Branagh, who I've worked with a lot. And the head of post at Paramount, Stephanie Ito, said, "Look, I think you guys should meet. It would be great if you could do Mission Impossible with Chris McHugh." Yeah, absolutely, it would. And so we got on. We got on really well. These projects are, as I'm sure you know from talking to various people, they are, and I hate using the word organic because it gets thrown around a lot, but they are organic. They are ever changing, ever growing, shrinking. It's a live being, and they've got this incredible editor at their helm, holding the reins to make sure that it's something that can be compiled. And Chris is a savant. He kind of knows what he's doing, like a second nature, and he has everything in his mind, but he's also completely open to brand new ideas at any moment that might put a twist on it. So it's an extraordinary process. And it has history, so it has a responsibility to all those fans and all those previous filmmakers that have had their iteration, and so it was our first outing. It was really good fun. It was long days, late nights, but that's why we do this job, because we can do that.
Taking over for Gary Rydstrom, not a big, not any big shoes to fill there. So
No. I figured he was quite happy for somebody else to have a bash at it.
Probably, yes.
I think he's probably got his hands full anyway. To be fair, I don't know if he was directing at that point or no. Obviously, we are in, and we have been. I have been trying to fill or emulate at least very large boots from some time now with the Harry Potter franchise. Obviously, that started with a very big input from my American colleagues and from Skywalker. And so it's been a very interesting evolution over the last 10 years as films have become more welcomed and homed in the UK. It's improved the standard of our craft immensely. And that's because the opportunity is there, but it's also because the bar is raised. And it's what we've always wanted. We have a style in the UK, but we're emulating and working alongside our friends in the States, and that's if you want to do these films, that's a real honor, and we respect and value our collaborations hugely. So obviously we're making a movie for Chris McQuarrie, but he's making a movie that has influences that he wants to nod to, and we started very early on learning his language, he's an aficionado on guns. He's really, really obsessed with guns in a way that, in a healthy way, not in a he has lots, but he wants them to sound right. He's heard enough sound wrong to know that it doesn't work. It's plausibility is a huge factor. It's a huge concern in all these movies. Everything has to be as true to life as it could be, so that when you take license and go a little bit off to the side, you're still held within the tram lines of reality. And so guns were a really big deal. Cars, obviously, the chases that we all know and love, the bikes. What was very apparent by the end of the mix on the first one, or we at Rogue Nation, we realized as we were going through the mix that taking things away was our friend. That there's so much, there's so many ingredients, there's so much visual, there's quick one-liners, there's pacey dialogue, cars screeching around corners, smashing into walls, whatever. And it's that point in your career where you're not worried about covering everything. It's where you're enjoying the point of what you can remove and what you can strip down to in order to allow the story be at its most potent and clear. And so we started getting that, I think, towards the end of the mix in Rogue Nation. Then obviously with Fallout, we just picked up where we left off and carried on and made it even more in that way. And it started very much with the initial scene where Tom is hanging off a plane. I believe that's that beginning of Fallout, or is that the beginning
No, that's
of
Rogue Nation. When he's on the side
It
of
is
the
Rogue
plane.
Nation.
Yeah.
So so I'll just go back to that, because that was the moment where we played the scene and Tom came in to have a listen. And it was like, yeah, guys, this, it's good. It's kind of but it needs to be, I need to feel it. And so we were suddenly thinking, well, hang on, we've never had a stuntman from a movie come and sit with us on the stage and tell us how it actually sounded when he did that stunt. But Tom is that stuntman. So he sits there and he's like, I need to feel what I had at the time. That is how it felt. And so we cranked it and we went for a whole array of frequencies, but overwhelmingly we wanted to make it dangerous and immersive and synaptic. I've got this thing about synaptic sound, that a soundtrack that can make you feel, make your heart rate change, make your breathing change, make you physically affected by what you're seeing and what you're hearing. And we got it there, and it was cranked and it was loud, and he loved it. And so we realized, okay, that's another angle that we have to consider all the way through. When we're with Ethan, and it has to be Ethan's point of view. If you lose his perspective, you lose the storyline, you lose the context. It has to be with the character. And that was a big lesson. That was a really important lesson. We weren't track-laying the movie. We were narrating the experience of the characters within the movie. And that's just increased continuously. The Halo jump, obviously, very, very subjective sound for that jump. It wasn't, it was from their POV. McHugh was very, very adamant that we had it with the breathing in the masks, and that you didn't get that rushing wind that sort of took you out of stuff.
Was the the way the sound cuts out, which is so shot when the lightning bolt, when the lightning hits. Was that always part of the plan from the beginning?
Yes, that was always part of. Yeah, that was always part of. I mean, that was a very late addition, visually a very late addition to the scene. But McHugh kept saying,
"Oh, really?
There's going to be this thing. There's going to be this thunder crack, and it's going to." And we had iterations of it, but not the final, version of that sequence. And I think we actually went off stage at that point, and we sat in a smaller room with Chris, and we worked it in a way so that he had the same experience, so he felt it. And it was this, how brutal can this attack, this electronic zap, how brutal can it be? If we keep it this brutal, is it going to break speakers in cinemas? And you kind of go, well, they always turn it down, but they're gonna think they've broken the speaker because it goes silent straight afterwards, and it's all muffled, and so the projectionists are going to be going, oh shit, the center speaker's gone, which we quite like the idea of, but there's always the counterbalance is that they panic and they do it anyway. So we weren't mixing to that. We were having fun with the idea that it's so startling and it's such a punctuation that it then allows us to then start building the energy up again. So you've got the jump out, and it's really quite big and operatic in a way, the stunt itself as they jump out of the plane. And by the time the lightning hits, you need that second breath to come in. And at that point, the lightning hits, everything goes quiet. And then you start hearing just the breathing, and then the counting, and then the jeopardy of landing with or without oxygen parachute. And it gives you that extra dimension, another dynamic to come from. And it's what we've done over and over and over in pretty much everything I work with. It's that notion that in order to have impact, you need to have dynamic. You've got to have that range and explore it. I love horror films. I was a huge fan of horror, and the jump moment is always in my mind a sound thing, and it's coming from a quiet place. So we explored that, and Eddie's an extraordinary editor in so many ways, but one of his passions is the soundtrack, and he plays a lot with the sound when he goes. I mean, his editing of dialogue is extraordinary. I mean, it's what you would expect a dialogue editor to do, but you wouldn't expect a picture editor to start looking at consonants and vowels and changing little bits of takes to make it clear. And he has a real passion for it, and he's extremely helpful to us and guides us in many ways in the way that the filmmakers see the pace and the rhythm of the soundtrack with the movie. And so we've developed a very close relationship and a shorthand with Eddie, which allows McHugh to then go off and shoot and do his thing, and then we'll have a screening. So there's a fluid system that works where we don't have to all see each other all the time. There's trust to see the people do their work. And I think the culmination of those two missions kind of resulted in Maverick. I think Maverick was the sort of distillation of a style of cutting and laying tracks, designing sound that incorporated all the things that we had learned along the way, which was a joy because it's what they wanted.
Right.
So we were on the right track.
Before we get too into Top Gun Mavericks, I want to make sure we get all our Rogue Nation and Fallout bits covered. Was there anything in Rogue Nation that was particularly challenging?
There were two scenes. There was the scene where he goes into the Taurus, I think it was, the water tank, and that's quite a tricky world to create jeopardy with sound, because there's not much in terms of frequency and texture. You're kind of underwater. It's not like you're coming in and out of water. I love the soundtrack on the 13 days that with the miners and the kids, because you're constantly being thrown in and out of two worlds, and it gives you a real sense of perspective. And I think with that Taurus scene, it was quite late in developing for us to be able to get to, and it was sonically, it didn't have as many dimensions as a lot of the other scenes. So we really concentrated, and we really worked hard with the intensity of how Ethan was feeling and performing and trying to do all the swiveling around and turning and these kind of dull thunk Foley that we used underwater. That, the less you have to play with, the more challenging it is. And obviously when you start taking stuff away, you start realizing that actually just Foley might work if you go gravity on it and just literally have the most basic thunks and stop trying to make all the water do something and stop trying to make the machines do something. You get a better result in a way, a more simpler storyline. The motorbike chase through the hills, motorbike chases are always a challenge, because you kind of got to go with the cut of the revs and the dips and the accelerations, and you've got an over-shoulder shot of the bike with the speedometer, and it's like you are being told that the bike is revving now because you're seeing it. And so technically those kind of scenes, although they shouldn't be, they can be a lot more challenging, just because you are tied to a construct that you have to follow. If anybody who knows a bike is watching and they see it, they're going to go, well, that's not, the bike's decelerating and the speedometer is going off the rail. So you kind of have to be incredibly respectful of the imagery, and therefore you have to be quite adept at throwing the energy of the bike around so it works with the cuts. There's a particular scene where he's hurling up the motorway, and there were quite a few trucks in there that came in at the end as visual effects, and in order to make it work and to make it exciting, we went through and we cut the sound of the motorbike every time it passed a gap in the trucks. So what we were doing was hearing the reflection off the side of the trucks of the motorbike rather than hearing the motorbike itself.
That's cool.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that we hadn't conceived or considered doing until we were in the mix, because the vision, now you're there and you're seeing it and you're going, oh wow, this is like he's going through a canyon with brakes.
And was that something similar that you applied in Fallout when you had Ilsa going through that the pillars, you know, and super fast on her motorcycle? Yeah. Oh, it's so cool.
It's one of those. It became a thing. Like, oh, this is great. Let's do this. And so, you know, there's more to come. There's more to come. Libra goes a little bit of that as well.
Oh, good. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Like to hear that.
But it has that chest wobble, that the sound, you know, the sound sort of reverberating off the chest, which it seems to go down very well. Yeah, and that was one of those things where you kind of feel like you've done everything you can do, and the last thing you think when you see the final visuals, you just go, oh, hang on, let's just lose the bike here, and you play it and go, that's what it would sound like if you're on that bike. That's what you'd be hearing.
Right.
We had a lot of fun.
Well, so going back to the Taurus, there's a story about how very late in the game, the part where Ethan essentially drowns, it was maybe not quite working or wasn't quite sounding right, and then they brought in a mic and Tom Cruise said something like, "Were you there for this when he?" Yeah. Can you tell how that went down?
Yeah, we sat on the stage, and it was all part and parcel of what I was saying, trying to get the sound of the struggle and the countdown be in time with his running out of oxygen. And again, you got the guy in the room. It's not like the stunt guy's gone off and done another film. He's there in the room. And so he's thinking, I want to do, guys, can I do a pass? Can I just get a pass? So we always have a mic and into the Pro Tools rig set up on the stage. And it was pretty cool. He did his pass. He did a pass to the picture, watching it on the screen, and it sounded great. He did it. I think he did 2 or 3, maybe 2. He wanted to pick up some extra bits, specifically with straining to undo the lever. And our dialogue editor, Simon Chase, was recording it as it was going in and lining it up as it was like, go back, line it up, ready. And they was like, okay, that's cool. So let's move on. And so I said, well, do you want to hear it back first? So we hit play. We played the second take just to see how it bedded in. And Tom's like, this is what we just shot. And he said, yeah, we're going to play it. We played it back, and he went, that's awesome. That's awesome. You could do it and listen back to it, and within a minute of it being shot he was I mean, Simon, we never stopped ribbing him. He's that awesome guy. And so yeah, but within 10 minutes of Tom getting up and doing his piece, we had it in the tracks. And it, much like the scene in the canyon with Maverick, it's one of those sections where Tom puts the performance in just in the effect of his voice and the intent of his character. And it's pretty impressive, because he is there, you're there, he's there, you're with him. You know that he's running out of breath, and he's kind of starting to, gag on his own lack of inhalation. So yeah, we had a lot of fun with that. Again, that was all on the stage, and that was all done during the final dub, which is kind of when you expect to have all that stuff in. But these ideas come up as they do in these projects,
right,
at any moment.
And can you talk about, specifically in Rogue Nation, there's the opera sequence, which is music sort of driving the background of that whole sequence, versus like the motorcycle sequence. I mean, McQuarrie really seems like he knows what he's doing. Obviously, he knows what he's doing. But in terms of going for a more music-driven sequence versus a very much sound effects-driven action sequence, and can you talk about the differences in that for you in what you're doing?
Yeah. I mean, any scene that's driven by a piece of opera is kind of tied to something quite unique. It's got but everyone knows the opera, everyone knows the Man and Butterfly, and it's you're limited to what you can do and you want to get it done within a certain amount of time. You're changing locations. You're going from within the opera house to the street to the back room to the surveillance van, and it was all very much about stealth. It was all very much about being with Ethan, seeing what was happening, hearing the very specific gunshots, silence gunshots, whatever needed to be heard, and not over embellishing, the crowd and the audience and the footsteps. And it was about our key characters. And the perspective shifts with the music really did all the heavy lifting. So wherever you were, whether you're with him backstage, going up the gantry, blah blah blah, the music would be changing and shifting, and it would give you that incredible perspective and immersion as though you were there with them. So for the music guys, that's a really big scene. That's a really challenging, editorially, a really challenging scene to make work, to keep in time, to keep in key. And for us, that was very much about the supplying the nuts and bolts of the spot effects, the feet, the right sounds for the climbing the ladder, the curtain moves as Ilsa looks through, and the kind of relief from when they get out and they slide down the sash, that relief of claustrophobia that scene had. Once they got into it, you were very claustrophobic. You were in that world and enveloped in the music, and they get out and you can breathe again. The interesting process with the BMW into the motorbike was something I'd not done before or come across before, and it was very much McHugh's philosophy that cars are. You get cars being chased by bikes. Cars have got a multiple language kind of effects driven. They do so much. There's so much that you can have with a car sound. You can go interior, exterior, up and down objects, screeching, smashing. There's more of a symphony with a car sound design in a chase. And then you've got the guys on the bikes with the guns, and you've got the small narrow streets so the whole point of the car chase was no music. It is its own score. And if you try to drive it with music, where do you go from? So you have the way it's cut and the way it's mixed, the car chase gets more and more crazy until eventually it's a reverse down an alley and a backflip over onto its roof in a car park. And ta-da, that's your moment. And it's humorous. It's, funny. There was a very funny story funny for us anyway. There's a story that when they were out in Morocco shooting this scene, which took a while to shoot, Tom would keep putting Benji's seat heater on at full, just to get him sweltering and sweating and feeling really uncomfortable, just for a laugh, just to pass the time. So there was this candid humor that pervades through their relationships in these films, which I love, and that was that's all part and parcel of the dance of these car chases. And then McHugh's very clear, once that happens, the single tone of the bike is like a kind of it's like a horn call. It's like a classical instrument, and it can, and then you're off, and then you get to the top shot and the drums come in, top shot, and the drums come in, and the music takes over, and he's driving us all the way through the mountains with the various passes. But because you're on a bike, there are very few other things you can do other than swerve, accelerate, take off. You can't smash into something because it's over. So you don't have that other sort of buffet of sounds to play with. So the music comes in and drives it, and that way you get this extended action scene that goes on for 20 minutes. But his take on bringing the music in and letting the music ride it is on point. It always works really well. And we kind of play to it now because we know where the hard work is going to be done, and for us the heavy lifting.
Right.
Yeah.
And then for Fallout, I mean, there's so many great sequences to talk about. I love the right after that big motorcycle chase, and that they're in the underground sewers with and you get the plot theme, Lauren's music, and everything kind of cuts out. Was that always the plan, to just go to music for that sequence after that big chase?
I'm trying to think. So he limps out. He crashes the bike and limps over the hedge into the boat. Is that the one you're talking about?
Yeah.
And then they get to another safe house where where the French policewoman is.
Yeah. But there's a sort of a kind of a nice, it's like a calming down sequence where they're just in the motorboat. That's like they've got Lane, and you take a breath and you get to hear the plot theme and this kind of like marching band version, and it's
remember. Yes,
it's this great like a time to take a breath. What was there a difference between the motorcycles in Rogue Nation and the motorcycle sequence in Fallout in your approach to that?
I mean, the Fallout scene is a much more dynamic scene in itself, just by the nature that you've got trucks and cars and got half of Paris driving around chasing them, and the police. Every shot has got some cavalcade of vehicles going through it, so you're having to box clever with making sure that the sounds that you use don't just keep sounding the same. So Ilsa's bike, like going through the archways and that kind of stuff,
right,
throughout those scenes, and the cobblestones. All these. We spent 2 days in Paris recording the different textures of the streets, of the roads, because they have the most incredible cobblestones. They're not sort of bobbly. They're flat cobbles, so they have quite a different sound. And that's a real friend when you've got so many things happening all at once. So that was a challenge. That was just a challenge in terms of making it exciting and not too much of just an assault. Just you didn't want it to be just noise. And the underwater section where the truck goes in underwater, so you've got this contrast of the pulling him out and the escape, and then everything else going crazy above. It's great fun. It's great fun to play with. And like I said before, Eddie has a real talent for keeping the energy going through those sequences with his edit. So for us, it's like playing a sort of drum solo over it, or being able to add something to enhance those beats and those rhythms.
Right.
So much of it comes together at the final mix because, as I said earlier, you've got everything you want to play with. And very often, one of the things that we haven't been able to really explore is the music. So when Lorne's score comes into the stage, it's just such a breath of fresh air and warmth, and it gives you the opportunity to go, oh, okay, we don't have to do all this. We don't have to play it like that. We can go this way and do that, or we can. And Eddie and McHugh have considered this all along, and we've had hints of it. But it's like you said, when they want to step the gear down and put a little bit of music just to bring you through to the next stage, where then we're doing a Godfather homage with the train over the top, and it becomes a lot more threatening. And it's like,
you're talking about with the police officer.
That's right.
And all the sound goes out except for the train going over.
Yeah,
it's so great. Yeah,
and everyone loves that train. We all want to do our version of that train because it's why we do what we do. With those movies, informed us so much of the power of sound, and that scene particularly was chosen. We chose that for that scene because in The Godfather, you don't see a train, you don't see the building shaking with a train. There's no hint of a train. It just is the right sound to give you that sense of tension. And there's the same with us. There's no train. You don't see the rails. You don't hear it. It was the perfect opportunity to give a bit of that.
That's amazing.
Praise.
And we're back.
Always love the way you reel it back in. It's just it's so nice and pleasing to the ears. I loved talking to James was awesome. This was great. I thought it was really interesting to hear again from another sound genius, I'll say. He said that less is more, that he's learned that, and that was something that Gary Rydstrom talked about when we interviewed Gary.
Yeah.
Gary said, I think he said he learned from James Cameron on Terminator 2, right? That less is more. That they would like really focus on just a few sounds as opposed to having like a giant soundscape of too many sounds.
Wow, really pays off, and it's really apparent in all of the movies that he's worked on too. That kind of focus, really makes things much more evocative and emotional. Yeah, really interesting.
Yeah, and I would say if you're really interested in sound and you this interview piqued your interest, I would say go back and check out that Gary Rydstrom interview.
Yeah.
That's episodes 108 and 109, and he was a sound designer and mixer for Ghost Protocol and the re-recording mixer for the original Mission Impossible, amongst a bunch of other movies as well that we talked to him about. And I think he did Jurassic Park too, didn't we? We talked to him about Jurassic Park, which is amazing.
We talked to him about Jurassic Park. We talked to him about his Pixar projects. He was at Pixar for a long time.
Yeah, that's right. Oh God, yeah, that's a great interview. And then also Mark Stockinger, who did Mission Impossible 2 and 3 and John Wick 1, 2, and 3. Supervising Sound Editor. That's another great interview with another sound guy. That's episodes 142 and 143. So those are really good to listen to for sure. Oh, yeah, and also we've got Michael Camper. He was the sound effects editor for Mission Impossible 3. That was episodes 75 and 76. So again, we've done a lot of, well, not a lot, but we've done a decent amount of sound, guys. We should get more. I think these interviews are great, so definitely check them out. I loved hearing about the Godfather homage, too. I thought that was really cool. You know, the scene with the train sound right when the cop is about to get executed. And, oh, God, that was so cool. And next time we get into more of Fallout, we get into Top Gun Maverick, and we even hear a little about Dead Reckoning Part 1. So you're going to want to come back because he does give some good teases for Dead Reckoning Part 1. Definitely going to want to hear that.
All right. What else, Charles? I think you've got some shout outs to give and some other stuff.
I do, yeah. I want to give a special thank you to Jacob from Holland and Thomas Victorio. Thank you, Jacob and Thomas. I also want to credit our editor and mixer, Luke Burson, and our music composer, Kevin Blumenfeld, and give a special thank you to our intern, Amber Cohen. We've got our Discord just about set up and ready to go. We're going to launch it for Patreon members. I'm not sure which level yet. We're going to have to figure that out, which level of our Patreon has access to that, but we will let you know, and that will be happening soon. And
that sounds like a perfect opportunity to plug our Patreon.
That's very good point. Patreon.com/LightTheFuse. Please sign up at the bonus content level. You'll get weekly bonus episodes where we talk about all kinds of things. We also do taste tests of random things. We recently did a taste test of the Mission Impossible chips, the Max Walker's crisps, I guess that you would say, that we did a couple different flavors, and we did that. And we also talk about movies, and we talk about movies. And so definitely want to check that out. And then we also have our higher tier levels of the Patreon as well, which you can join our monthly Zoom chat and stuff like that. So please sign up, patreon.com/lightthefuse. You can also support the show by buying a shirt or a magnet or a pin or whatever from our TeePublic store, which is tpublic.com/user/lightthefusepod. And that, I believe, is the address. You can also find that direct link from our website, lightthefusepodcast.com, under the merch tab. That will give you a direct link to our TeePublic page. And while you're on our website, you can check out our episode guide, which has show notes, excellent visual companion to everything that we do here on the show. What else, Drew?
Well, I just want to encourage everybody to like, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you're listening to this podcast. Yeah, just tell people about it. Get the word out. You know, we frustratingly lost another award today. Tom Cruise did not get Best Podcast Guest this year. Tom Hanks did. But
what? There was a podcast awards thing?
I guess. I saw it on Twitter.
And Tom Hanks won?
Tom Hanks won for Dead Eyes.
Listen.
We love Connor.
I love Tom Hanks.
I know.
Okay, everyone loves Tom Hanks, but we all know who the true winner here is.
Yes. Yeah. So, you know, your suggestion to somebody, you know, will be the difference in us winning or losing a podcast award. So,
yeah, you know,
just something to think about.
But you know what? We don't do this for the awards. We do it for all of you out there. Just like Tom and just like McHugh and Cruise. They don't do it for the awards. They're doing it for the audience.
Yeah,
just like
it's
us.
True. It's true. We've never gotten or been nominated for anything. So we definitely do not do this award for the awards. But We do it for you. And next week, we will bring you part 2 of James Mather. I think you're going to love it. It's really great. It goes into Light the Fuselage territory. And yeah. What else? Anything else, Charles? I think that's it.
That's it. Yeah. Come back for part 2. You don't want to miss it.
All right. We'll be back.
Thanks again for listening, everyone. Before we go, another mission, should you choose to accept it, please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And remember that you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at LightTheFusePod, and email us questions or comments at lightthefusepodcast@gmail.com. This message will self-destruct in 5 seconds.